This is the Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition, and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think, and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Jessica Perez. She's a coach, connector, SoloPreneur, Residual income, Enthusiast, Biohacker, and speaker. So welcome onto the show, Jessica.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited.
The pleasure is all mine. Beyond the initial introduction that I've given you, what additional nugget would you like to give to or should I say, share with my audience?
Oh, well, this conversation is all going to be about supersizing. So I guess I start with I'm 4'11". And I've been an athlete my whole life, but I've taken those athlete concepts to just to kind of live life, right? Being dedicated, being a good teammate, all of those types of things really have transformed who I am and what I do in life from a work perspective too. So I think sport, when you said, I love just the name of your podcast, because that's really what we need to be doing in life, not just in sport. To me, it's one and the same.
And you mentioned obviously your height, Jessica. What kind of adversity did you face? Obviously, with that being an issue.
Yeah, for sure. So 4'11". I've been this tall since sixth grade, and I'm much older than sixth grade age, right? So when you talk about adversity, it's really there's little things that you don't think about, like you can't get to the top of a cabinet. Like I'd have to ask for help all the time until I realized, well, you know what, just go get your own step stool and you can get it too, right? So you begin making transitions to, yeah, so what, I'm a little short. Oh, well, shortest one in the class, always. Shortest one on every single team I was on, always. To the point where some of my coaches, when they put the roster out, they'd say, she's 5'2". I was like, why are you telling people I'm 5'2"? Like, who cares? So I didn't have as much of a hang up as some of the folks surrounded, going like they couldn't believe that I was that aggressive or that, and I say aggressive because in sports, aggression is important, to go get a ball or to be actively engaged in the activity, whatever the sport is. I played all team sports. So I think I was more of a surprising little nugget maybe for folks, which the adversity was really more in the mindset, I think, than actually my height. Like I just did things like everyone else. I didn't care if someone was taller or bigger, but I really had to get my mind in the right space to say, you can do those things. So I think the adversity was overcoming some of my own shortcomings, right? The shortcomings, the thoughts of just because you're small means you can't do. In effect, it doesn't matter if you're tall, short. There's a lot of 6'4" folks who I could steal a ball from because they didn't have the same supersized mentality in their own mind that they, that here I was able to, take a steal from them, let's say in basketball, because my mind was bigger than theirs at that moment, right? At that moment. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
But in terms of the adversity that I thought you were going to mention, and most people will resonate what I'm going to say, it's motivation. But what in terms of what I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, the motivation factor, should I say, was not necessarily that you were smaller than everybody else, but it was the willingness to kind of work at your mindset more than other people to get a kind of an edge.
So let me frame that. I love that lead-in question. I'll frame that. Had I not had the environment of a dad and a mom, I was blessed to be able to have both in the same house my entire, being parents to me, both in two different areas where they helped mold and shape my mind right? That I can do things bigger and stronger and better maybe than someone else, is because of the fact that my dad was an extreme athlete himself, but never made it to the next level, right? So he poured into me his knowledge of sports and dedication, loyalty. He really believes that a good teammate is somebody who's loyal to each other. Like those are real sound, like characteristics and character building things that allows the mind to get bigger, I believe, in the development of a young athlete or a young person, just being a good person. And so I believe it's not just about the sport aspect, but the development of a person through sport, okay, that both my parents helped form. So the adversity piece that you mentioned, you're absolutely right. I never felt smaller than, because they never allowed me to feel smaller than. Does that help? Mm-hmm. It's that formation there. My mom, she's 5'1", she's a little peanut, but there's not a person that hasn't met her that believes, my God, she has the biggest heart. That woman can just embrace anybody. Like you walk into our home and you feel like you're her kid. She has that loving nature, which is a supersizing feeling of love every day. Like we'd walk in the house, and I was talking about this with you before, I come from a Spanish and Cuban culture. And so our culture is very much an embracing, hugging, loving culture anyway. But I had two parents in the home who bred that every single day, which just gives you this sense of, I don't want to say power, but like you can do things when you didn't even think that you could. So I think that's where the cultivation of the supersizing thoughts that I have now as an adult, that I hope to help share with other folks so that they too can understand, yes, we all have adversity. You have adversities. People may look at you and go, well, I can't do anything about this either. I can't grow taller. This is my space. And so I do think that having that as almost like a fertilizer to my ground to be able to grow was really what sparked the true growth of myself throughout my journey, until I was about 25, my dad passed away, but he is still a viable in my brain. I still think about, okay, dad would do this here. Dad would say this here. That's how strong his personality was, as far as giving roots to who, not only myself, but both my sisters feel the same way. He didn't have any sons. He had 3 girls. So, for him, it was like, how can I raise independent young women? That was his big thoughts, I want you to be able to be strong in your own foundation and who you are. And coupled that with my mom and her nurturing and her love and all the things, she didn't know sports. She just was like, you're great. Yay. She was that kind of cheerleader, which was awesome. So I had, the dichotomy, but also the collaboration between those two individuals to be able to raise 3 amazing women that are now, both my sisters raising their families the same way. Which is really kind of cool. So yeah, I think that's really where it was, where it stemmed. It wasn't like I was born this way. It definitely was a cultivation and nurturing by our circle. My grandparents were very, our family is very tight. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we're doing a Zoom Easter celebration because we can't be together. So all the family's getting together via Zoom, and connecting on a really cool level, which I think is important for folks today.
But you mentioned there, Jessica, the support network and support that you had growing up. But even with that being said, were there cases where you did face adversity?
Oh, always. When we talk about adversity, and you've mentioned that term a ton, and to me, I look at every opportunity of adversity as a place of growth. I don't look at it in a way of adversity is going to shift my thoughts and create a different person. I come from a family where adversity is what leads you to your next space. So yes, have I faced adversity? I've been fired from jobs. I've been told I wasn't the right fit for a job that I thought was my dream job after 6 months, and the Band-Aid gets ripped off and you go, okay, now what? Right? So rug's been pulled out from under me. My father dying at 25 was not expected. You know, those are adversities to me. When you talk about adversity, things that are happening to me, but me, myself, I look at those as circumstances that I happen to have to go through as a part of life's journey. So I look at adversity in a different space maybe than some folks. And I do believe it's because of the deep foundation that our family has had, that no matter what, we have this unit that will help you get through that. You don't have to do it alone. You can do it with a group. You can identify who that person is. Sometimes it was my mom that helped me through with something, or sometimes it was my dad. If it was a sporting space, typically I'd rely on my dad. That's his wheelhouse, right? And I'd be like, Dad, I really want to be the starting whatever, but I'm only in the 9th grade and everybody else is juniors and seniors. And he's like, okay, well, you tell me what is the one thing that's missing on your team, and we're going to work on that. And then he'd find that weakness within the team and help me decide, okay, I'm going to be the best defensive player out there, because that was a strength of mine. So I just fought. And as a 9th grader, I ended up in the starting lineup midway through the season as a defensive specialist, as a 9th grader, beating out juniors and seniors, to the point where they were looking to me for leadership. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I just know that I'm going to work hard. So I was working hard as a leader, and they were looking up to me at my work ethic. Mm-hmm. And the work ethic was derived from a goal I wanted to achieve, wasn't sure how to do it, but I was coached well enough through my parents to say, well, when you don't know, you need to ask. And so many people don't do that, right? Oh, I got this. I got it. But do we really have it? So I have carried that philosophy up. That's a 9th grade story through my entire journey. I mean, I'm 52 now. I still think about that story, and I use that in a consistent mechanism. So if I want to get to the next level in a promotion, or I want to get to this position, or I want to have a deeper relationship with someone, I'm not afraid to go, I'm not sure where we're going with this, but could we just have a conversation? Could maybe we just talk and get to a real space with someone, so that then that becomes a real blessing to overcome whatever that adversity may be, whether it's a challenge in a relationship or a death that's occurred in your family, and you're just like, I can't deal with this. I don't even know how to get out of this hole that I'm in. So I use those principles and try to pull them out of it's almost like a little toolbox. Like that's one way to get over an adversity, going back to what that story was. I think we all have them. We just don't know how to tap into them. I think they're inside of all of us to be able to overcome adversities. I really think that we do. We've just never explored them, or taken the time to take a seat and take a step back and have someone help through that adverse moment, but be open to what they might share, because a lot of times we don't want to hear what's coming on the other side, I don't know. Does that kind of tap into where you're headed, or what your thoughts are?
I think so, because ultimately the notion of people either, when they do come to that fork in the road and having to deal with adversity, obviously you're going to have two different perspectives in terms of some that are going to seek support, probably the middle ground that some, and I'll include a third part, the ones that are middle ground that are reluctant to, but will seek support because they are struggling. And then finally, the third point, obviously the ones that don't.
You still there, James?
Yep.
Hello.
I don't know what happened there.
I don't know either.
Did you?
No.
Because it was saying your, and I'll edit this.
Is it mine?
It was saying it was your.
Interesting. I mean, I have like 5 little thingies, so I don't know. Maybe it was just like a surge or something, like internet surge or something. Listen, it's America. You never know, buddy.
It's not. Well, normally
That's
I wouldn't get.
It's never happened to me before, so I don't. Right. That's weird.
In terms of the adversity, obviously you do come to a fork in the road, or people do in general. they either kind of fall in terms of the ones who are going to seek support, the middle ground of the ones that are either going to be reluctant to seek support, but will inevitably do it anyway because they've faced an issue that they can't deal with by themselves. And obviously the final one, where people can see where I'm going with this, are the ones that are reluctant to, and kind of no matter what, they're going to try and do it by themselves.
Yeah. So, in terms of those folks, the folks who are closed in a sense and just, I can't, or they have the block, if that's what we want to call it, a block to vulnerability, to opening up, to any of those things. I believe for them, if we can get to a point, and I do coaching on the side as well, right? So one-on-one coaching, team coaching, things like that. But if given an opportunity to be able to, even on a Zoom like this, right, to simply look at someone in the eye and say, look, I'm here for you. When you're ready, if you ever get ready, know that the playing field is open for you to share whatever, whenever, and at whatever time you choose, right? Even if it's only a snippet. And allow people to know that there's no judgment zone. It's a free, open zone. It takes a special person to be on the receiving end of that too. I mean, not the person who's receiving the information from you, but from me, let's say, is that person who's wanting to help, right? To not push, to not be in a space where you got to open up. You got to let me know. You got to, that in itself creates more anxiety and more pushback in an individual. So it really should come from a place of compassion, being compassionate for where that person is and why the blocks are there or the closing up is there. So to me, it's more about really understanding to understand, if that makes any sense. I mean, that's kind of a strange term, right? But to understand them, not you in that space. It's like I become a non-existent connection for someone. I just happen to be the vehicle who's asking maybe one or two questions with no real purpose other than to help that person feel completely comfortable, to maybe say, I never thought about that, but yeah, there is something that's been bothering me. I don't know if I can share it with you yet, but just know I appreciate that. To me, that in itself is a breakthrough. Like that's a massive breakthrough. And then me has to accept that as that person receiving that information and go, man, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Again, whenever you're ready, you're ready. And allow it to mature and evolve. For some people like me, I'm a pretty open book. I'm just like, hey, you asked me a question. I don't know that there's really any off limit questions. I do an interview thing with folks every other week with another woman. We kind of collaborate and we just interview folks on their supersizing journey and what does it look like for them, right? And she and I were talking about questions to ask and to interview folks, and it was interesting. One of her questions, well, we should really ask the interviewee, if they have any off-limit questions. And it kind of hit me because I was like, are there off-limit questions? Like I didn't think of any. And she goes, well, there are some folks that perhaps would have them. And I said, that's true. We should kind of ask that before we interview someone, because maybe we're going down a path that's a little too, especially if I know the person or if she knows them intimately, right? And their story, you might want that story to be shared, but maybe that person's not prepared to share it with the world just yet, even though they shared it with you, So it was an interesting thought process. So your question kind of took me down a rabbit hole of thinking through that. You're right. There are some folks who don't have the same openness for various reasons, with no judgment. I was blessed to be raised in a pretty here's what you got household. But that is not necessarily typical or traditional or unique. It could be considered unique to some. Heck, my mom lives with me and my sister. Look more unique to other folks, but to me, it's my norm, right? And it comes very naturally for me to open my doors to family in need who say, you know what, this is the best situation for us. Let's just all, be here together. So yeah, I think you're right. I think trying to be in a space of allowing folks to on their terms and their time to be able to be vulnerable and open when and if they want to be, to overcome their own adversities. You can be a partner in the process, but it really has to be generated by them.
Do you think from that basis then, Jessica, that people are more or less so reluctant to want to face their own adversities because of what was the fastest pace of life that we were living up until a few weeks ago?
Yeah. I think you're right. I think, so I think of where we're living right now. It's so funny because, one of my best friends, she's taken a little, disconnecting to reconnect space. She's been someone who's on social media, 5,000 friends here, maxed out here. I mean, she's out there, right? Elite runner, athlete. You might even want to interview her. I think you guys would really connect. But Jess was on her name is Jessica as well, was on a road to making the Olympic team, right? She's dual citizen, Canada and US. And she had adversity. You want to talk about adversity? Broke her foot in the Boston Marathon during Olympic trials. Boom, career done. She could have kept trying to train for 4 years later, but she's like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, this was my year. That thought process. This was my year. So she's someone who's gone through, like she calls it, broken to bringing it. She's writing a book and things like that. But the reason why I say that is she reached out to me last night and said, I've been trying to understand this new norm. Like, this is so different because she is an outside person, but she's actually an introvert by nature. She needs her downtime because she is such a public figure in a sense, right? So she needs that quiet space. And she's like, this has been actually great for me. Like, I've been able to recharge and have space for me. But I'm looking at other people and they're just like, it's like so much noise out there and they don't know. She goes, I'm like wondering how can I help transition these folks into the next space? And I said, I thought about it and I woke up this morning and I wrote her a message back and I said, I don't know if it's about transitioning as much as it is helping people understand. It's always been there. Like, Zoom has been a platform for I don't know how long, but all of a sudden people have found it out, right? Mm-hmm. They found out that, this is a way to communicate. Like, I've been communicating on Zoom for 5 years, but this is a brand new platform for millions of people, including school systems that are now using this platform just to be able to educate kids, And so then I think I take it one step further. So when you say that about diving into someone personally, what if they're in their home and now they're kind of faced with actually looking in the mirror a little bit more? And I mean, looking in the mirror, like, who am I really in the mirror? Because now it's a different space, right? Where you're in your own space and you can be in your own head and those moments. So I say, and what I shared with her was, I don't know so much that it's because we've removed ourselves from physical spaces, right? And being physically close to people, that if we can help people understand the impact of this type of thing, whether it's a podcast or a Zoom workshop or happy hour hangouts that people are having now, just to hop on and say, hey, how are you? We had one last night at 5 o'clock here in the Eastern time zone, and we had 30 people on and we just hung out and we shared fun stories. And I said, I didn't even know that about you, Gary. Those kinds of things. And oh my goodness, Dr. Joan, we had a friend of mine up in Connecticut pop on and she was just sharing her experiences. And, I think if we can help people recognize that you don't have to be here, that as soon and as often as you can to do a personal virtual connection and how to do that well. You and I were talking about this the other day, like, I'm looking at you right in the eye, even though this may be on a podcast and just audio goes out, like seeing you virtually on Zoom. You have a much connected conversation than simply being on a phone, right? and to use any platforms, whether it's Zoom or WhatsApp video or WeChat. I have folks in China that I know that I can connect via WeChat virtually too, and knowing what those platforms are. So maybe educating people on how they can stay connected. And, really, what does that mean? That means that they don't have to completely be in their own head. They can be sharing that with someone else. Because to me, the human connection does not necessarily have to mean touch. Human connection can be, it's across miles. You're in the UK. I'm here. I'm in the States. I'm as far away as you can really be, So, but yet I feel emotionally connected to you and what you're trying to do. And I'm here as a servant to do that with you, to reach whoever it is that wants to listen. And I think that's the broader piece about where we are as a society and as a whole, as a world, going through this pandemic stuff. How can we maintain connectedness? I think people seek it and search it. And we've all been looking for it. I think everybody has, and they try it with this or they try it with a text and yeah, I'm connected. And they put the phone down and they just blah, 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 blah. But we're kind of forced to be looking at things differently right now. And I think that's not a bad thing. It's kind of, let's be introspective. Tomorrow's Easter. I was raised Catholic. It's a big time in our world having Holy Week this week. Okay. Whether you believe in religion or not, for me, it's a vital aspect to who I am. So last night we did virtual mass. It's what I can do to stay connected to my faith, right? And everyone does what they do to stay connected to whatever it is that is their essence. And to me, that's a part of who my essence is. So hopping on this morning is a joy to say, ooh, I get to connect with James again and just share, have a cool conversation. Because I think that's what's going to move our world into a better space where we can breathe again and not be frantic, thinking about the what ifs. What I do know is connection is real. That's what I know. I know that.
Do you think on that point then, Jessica, it's giving a new meaning, as you put it, as what is true connection versus what was for the majority of, I'll just use 2020 as the example, be it January to March in Europe and in the Americas. Before that was, like you were saying, it was very much, people were held at arm's length to some degree. Even maybe if I use probably the demographic of people that like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, like the stuff is very micro managed. Twitter as well, and be it's a split shot. Whereas if you go back to, just using the sporting analogy for argument's sake, people 10, 20 years ago would watch 4 games of no matter what sport it, whereas now people are consuming highlights to get their quick fix in terms of the sport.
I knew you were going to say those 2 words. That was in my head when you said quick fix. I was like, he's going to say quick fix. You're 100% right. It is so true. It's almost like, 5,000 friends, 10,000 friends, 20,000 friends, 100,000 subscribers, followers, whatever, right? Who's truly connecting in those spaces? And I use my friend as an example. She is recognizing the value of this because she too has been a part of that. She's 34, right? Grew up in the social media spaces. I 52, I'll use my age as an example. I have come into social media. That was not a part of like how I grew up in my, 18s, 20s, early 30s, right? So think about that in that space is that when I did something great, it didn't go, my accomplishments weren't spread out all over social media or my challenges, right? I didn't get my mugshot pasted somewhere. It might've been in a paper if something happened to Jessica, and who gets the paper these days, right? Mm-hmm. So a different dynamic. So I look at it as an ever evolving, changing world. And now we're at a space where take a step back, goes, but who are my real friends? Let's have that conversation. Who am I really connected to? And who do I choose to be connected to? Because you can choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I've chosen to want to pursue a connection with you because you came highly recommended, if you will, from another good person that I met through social media, Chip. And he's like, you've got to meet James. Like when he puts his stamp of approval, in a sense, it's what a cool referral to have when someone shares that about you, right? You've got to meet someone. And I've done that with Chip. Chip, you've got to meet this person. He's like, absolutely. You tell me if they're connected to you, I know that I'm going to get something positive from this experience, whatever it may look like. And I think my dad used to do that back in the 60s and 70s when he was, here and working in the environment. That's how we got our car fixed, was because someone told us, because that was the guy, mechanic you need to go to. He's the man. We didn't go in the newspaper. We didn't look here to see which ad was going to give me 50% off. We went because someone referred them because they were the best out there, because their reputation meant something. So I think about right now, we can be in an awesome space where we are sharing things that we believe wholeheartedly in. And if you definitely have a belief system, then I can share with you, hey, I really believe this is the best this. And you can do your research for sure. But now we have a more connected feeling. So I do think that right now, the transient stuff, the drive-by kind of conversations that people have that don't mean anything. I mean, James, I've gone back through, I keep notebooks. I like to write in notebooks and jot down my ideas. And so I have like notebooks everywhere. I'm trying to get more organized with that. Right. But I have one by my bed. I have one here. And so in those spaces, I've met so many really cool people. And I'm like, oh, I got to get back to that person. Like they were awesome. Like I saw them at a networking event, or maybe I met them somewhere. Right. And I thought, you know what? I'm in my house now. I have an online business that I can do from here. I'm blessed for that. But I also do speaking engagements that are not happening right now. So how can I fill my time? Right? How can I fill my time? And I said, you know what? I made a conscious effort. I went through my notebooks. I jotted down these folks that I kept saying I was going to reconnect with that I never did. And I reached out. And so in the last 3 weeks, I have reached out to 20 people, you included, okay, that I had said, you really need to stay in touch with this person. One I hadn't seen in 18 months. And she's the one that we're now doing this interview series with. Like, how cool is that? Because she's like, I am so glad you reached out to me. Thank you. I thought the same thing, and I just never reached out. How many times do we do that where you had a really cool moment, and then we let the moment go, and we just let the moment go? And I believe connection is something right now that we can hold on to and not let those moments pass us, as much as we can.
But from your personal perspective and opinion, Jessica, then, why do you think that we have, I use the word loosely, evolved into being two ships passing in the night from a generation ago, that wouldn't happen?
Yeah. I wish I had this book here, but I'm looking at my books. There's a book that talks about this, the phone actually taking us away versus bringing us together. Now think about this. Back in about 2000, when social media really started to, lay its footprints, it's been about 20 years, okay, where social media started to really kind of, find its footing. MySpace or whatever started, right? Facebook, all of that in the next few years. So, in that regards, it's also the generations that have come. So it's people my age that have kids, or my sister's age. My sister's 59. She'll be 60. Oh, wait. Yeah, she'll be 60 this year. It's folks her age. My nieces are 27 and 31. So they're kind of in that range that I'm going to talk about right now. So what happens is my sister, my parents were two blue collar. I'm using our family as an example. Blue collar people. My dad worked a couple jobs. My mom did too. They put us through private school, which was a huge stretch. I mean, we didn't have money. I used to work at the high school that was private Catholic school, we used to work in the office to offset some of our tuition because they couldn't afford the whole thing, right? So I'm not opposed to understanding. So when someone wants something, my parents wanted us to have that private education. They wanted us to have that as a backbone, but yet they couldn't afford it. And so we were a partner in the process as kids. So I totally get that. So I use that story because our family taught us hard work ethic. We don't have it all, but we're going to get you what you need. Fast forward, when my sister begins having kids, I'll use my older sister as the example. When she starts having kids, now she wants to, she's in a space where she wants to protect her kids and give them whatever she didn't have as a kid, meaning things. Because, we were not poor. We just were, average. You get 1 or 2 toys at Christmas and that was about it. Now, both she and my brother-in-law were successful financially. So guess what the kids got? Stuff. Fast forward a few years later, my brother-in-law passes away when my nieces were 8 and 12. Okay, so as their parent, my sister now feels compelled to give even more to make up for a lost parent. It's things that happen in everybody's lives, right? So as that's occurring, now she's giving more and giving more, making sure they can go on trips and they can have this and they can have stuff. Parents of that generation, I'm going to use her in a broader term, but parents in that generation, there's a really awesome book. I got to remember it. I'll drop it to you. But woman talks about Dr. Michelle Borba is her name. She's a psychologist. And in her book, she writes about that factor being across the board. Maybe not a death in the family, but definitely parents of that generation wanting to give their kids more or things that they didn't have before. Then comes the phone. Then comes this, the cell phone, the selfie. That's what it's called, selfie. It's the selfie era, right? Where people start, hey, it's all about me, taking photos of themselves, right? It now becomes a me generation because they've been told, let's give you this, let's give you this. It's okay, no problem. You got a problem at school, I'll fix it for you. Becomes a fix it kind of generation where now, by virtue of things that have occurred, I'm not saying that it's done on purpose or anyone wants kids to not feel, but as an educator, I've seen the shift. I used to teach phys ed and coach athletics from 91 all the way through till like 2010 maybe. I think 2010 is when I stopped coaching, like actively coaching in high schools. Now I do like like I said, the leadership stuff. But around 2010, 2012, right in there. Actually, 2012 is when I stopped coaching softball. So I wasn't teaching, but coaching still. And so I saw the shifts. As a coach, I saw shifts over 20, 22 years of coaching. Not necessarily the types of kids, but how the kids were reacting to things. And how their parents, different conversations, like a parent conversation in 91 was different than my parent conversations in 2012, I can tell you right now, right? And a lot of that was over that type of a shift where this became the norm, or I'll just text it to you. Like I've told my nieces, if you have, like, sometimes those texts should actually be a conversation. Hey, I need to borrow money. That's not a text. That's a, hey, I'm a little short this month. Let me tell you why. You know what I'm saying? If you really need money, then let's have a conversation now, face-to-face, maybe here, on a virtual face-to-face. But, those are the kind of things that I think take us into different spaces, especially today, and in the Americas especially, where things mean something to people. And it has just evolved I think just by nature. I don't think it's just any one culture or anything. I think it has to do with, it's almost like an ATM society. I got to have it now. So when you said the quick fixes, I see that everywhere. There's no quick fix right now. We don't have a quick fix for COVID. We don't. So the new norm is that we don't have a quick fix. You might as well settle in, figure this out. How can we still connect? How can we still move forward in our work life, our business life, or whatever, our relationship lives, regardless of what's happening outside of the 4 walls that you live in, I think that's going to be our growthful moments. We're going to grow a lot. I'm growing a lot. I'm looking at my business model, right, of me going out as a guest speaker and talking in front of audiences as being maybe a little precarious and probably not going to happen for a little bit. So how can I still share those character and leadership messages? So one of the organizations that I work with, they're like, that's okay. Let's just perfect the Zoom world and let's do some of these via Zoom. We're just going to have to change, Jessica, how you connect with people. Leaning in to get their approval, you know what I'm saying? And just, I'm finding ways to be able to connect using the skill sets that I have at hand. I can't walk by someone and put a hand on a shoulder and say, come on in here and let me tell you how this is going to work in a group setting. We don't have group settings right now. So how can I engage that same vulnerability and openness when I'm sharing information with people on a Zoom? I'm just learning some new techniques to be able to do that a little bit better. So I hope that kind of helps your thoughts there.
So if we go a step further than that, and obviously with the US, obviously from an academic standpoint, be it everywhere probably in the world is shut their schools now, but be it from a adversity standpoint, because the person I spoke to on episode, what would it be, 199, who is a teacher himself, was saying obviously the seniors were very much, and it's also in another episode I spoke with by the Dr. Fergus Connolly this week as well, on similarly that obviously people are in week one or when it is leading into schools possibly shutting down, people are up and kind of joyful. What do you think for those particular children? What are they going to obviously endure or have to adapt or master to deal with, quote unquote, a generation that's been given I'm going to use loosely, a free pass educationally, because ultimately they're not able to sit exams or final exams.
Yeah.
Some may not be able to graduate. So it's technically, well, you've not really fully experienced the last years of your, for some, maybe their educational lives. Obviously, for some, it's only the beginning. But for them, what are they going to have to endure or have to repeatedly come across when they speak to, be it the next generation, the generation previously? Well, you didn't really have to endure anything. You kind of got what word would I want to use? A gimme, in terms of, well, we couldn't test you or test you in a fair enough way historically being. So we got to give it on merit. Obviously, the people that are going to probably suffer a little bit are the ones who are not very practical minded, in terms of, well, if we use phys ed as the example in the UK, there's a practical element and there's also the theory. Well, if you're not very good at the sport, that's now your grade. Or, okay, there's mock testing as well, which will come into play. But they're weighted equally. So somebody like me, like we mentioned yesterday, as we were talking, I did the opposite. I was very, very practically. I'll go on a whim. I'll be self-centered a little bit for once, because people think I don't do it enough. Technically gifted, so I would flourish there. And then my family historically, I won't say crumbled under the pressure of an exam setting, but not dealt with it very well. So mine would be, I would probably benefit on people like me who are better on that side of the fence will probably benefit as a result of not having to. So if people turn around next year, I'm not happy with my grade, people like me, and I'm going, you give me that on merit, fine, I'm going to walk away, I'm happy. Obviously, the ones that there's going to be obviously outliers in both cases, people are going to be questioning what I think I could have done better. I don't know what they'll do if you did then sit that physical exam and then did worse.
Right.
What would you do? Because ultimately they might say, well, that's the grade you now have to take because you were adamant that you wanted to do it again. So I don't know. I don't know what position they're going to have to take. I know speaking to people in the tertiary level, like college and universities, they're doing it as online platforms. So he was saying to me that expanding the exam period for 24 hours. Okay, that's people are going to cheat then because it's like, you've got nobody walking down the aisles, making sure you're not cheating. And I think his university was saying, we expect high marks. Well, people are going to point fingers at that. It's like, well, you only got a high mark based on, and I will generalize because some people will probably get it on merit because they were studious. You only got this high mark because you potentially, I'm not going to say people are cheaters, but you had the potential to be able to open Google, leave your notes out in front of you while you're doing the exam. So it's like, well, I could argue for even when I went to university, technically, if you studied past papers, and you could call it laziness on the invigilator's part in terms of, well, you could set a paper, completely different paper, but you can virtually, if you do the statistics, you could gauge, well, if you got to do, I don't know, I think it's 3-4 essay questions in an exam for my degree, 2 questions of, there would be a trend in terms of, well, this year this has come up, this year this hasn't, and there'd be an outlier of a question, well, this is definitely going to come up, and you'd revise that one. So be it, that's technically laziness in terms of, well, I'm not studying the syllabus completely, and I know most people would not be able to do that, it could be too difficult. That's technically cheating and taking shortcuts. It's like, well, I'm going to study these because they may come up, and you're taught that as well in university. It's like, these may come up, or we have an inkling that study this versus that, and you'll do it. And virtually, I think in terms of, from a theoretical standpoint, university, you're just you at the lower levels, you just regurgitate the information that you're taught. So you're not really having that knowledge deep engrossed, but some of it will stick. But the majority, or if I use and I'm quite happy to throw myself under the bus with this, my first exam would be okay because it'd be fresh. The ones therein after would be very difficult because I would do one exam, bang, pick up the next one, and you can't do that. So because you don't have the capacity to a certain extent learn the next part of the say modules, for example, like a component within that degree that you're doing, because you'll put more importance on the first one and then the others will suffer. And that's probably why my exam status has struggled, because it's like, well, I'm focusing on one and I should expand because the mind can do it. It's just, you've got to treat it like a muscle and to a certain extent push its buttons to kind of, well, if I learn as much as I can, subconsciously it will stick. You just got to keep repeating it like over and over again. And it's something that I've introduced myself back to Spanish to give me something different to do. And I haven't done Spanish since high school, and people wouldn't know that. So it's putting an app in place as to, well, okay, you're not really testing me because most of that I know, but you're regurgitating it in terms of, well, this is what I want you to translate from English to Spanish, vice versa. And I think for me, I think it is the Castilian one, and I learned Mexican Spanish. So some of the words, like, well, I'm sure I wouldn't use that word, or I wasn't taught that word. So it's difficult. It's like, well, I don't recognize this word. So to me, it doesn't look like the right one. But I think from the learning basis, obviously your doing that mode of repetition, you know, the 100,000 hours that, I can't remember what doctor it was, and somebody has disputed that's not technically true in terms of a sporting sense. You are able to then acquire a skill. And I think because some people are not willing to test their boundaries and try something new. Obviously, for me, Spanish, I haven't spoken for probably over 10 years, but it's obviously still there subconsciously because it's like, well, this, this is what it is. Obviously, some of it's like really basic, and that's why I was like, well, I'm not starting from scratch. And the willingness to try to communicate, because from my business, I'll have South Americans or Latinos. Latinos are obviously slightly easy because they can speak English as well. I can't have if your English isn't good enough, I can't have a conversation because it's like business-wise, they wouldn't know where to go with it. Whereas with my upbringing, with living in Belgium, my French, I could probably do it, especially speaking. Maybe the written translation, communication that you were talking about earlier would struggle, but being able to have an importance on this shift to coming back to this and the visual, I can have a conversation with somebody, and grammar doesn't even come into it. How somebody speaks is not important. And I think, obviously, with working in an education setting as well, I think that shift from the appreciation for language or what it can do to give you a step up, I think for some, if not a majority, I'm not going to say the majority, I'm saying that some of those are in a minority based on where they are. They've lost sight of that in terms of, well, why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to utilize it. I'm thinking, well, that's very short-sighted in terms of this connectivity that you have to the outside world, that if you are able to speak a plethora of languages, I'm not saying you're going to be able to get work, but it does obviously give you I'll use your words, it's supersize on somebody else because you have a skill set that they don't have. So I think from that basis, it's disheartening to kind of see the kind of say turn to you, well, what's the purpose of it? Well, why do I need it? Obviously, they learn it probably too late at the age of 11. You're already starting to get set in your ways. Whereas I was thrust in an environment that my mum wanted me to learn another language, and I started at 3, 4, 5 years old. So for me, people are very interested. Well, how are you able to speak with no accent? Well, it was almost yes, it's my second and third language. Well, Spanish would be. I did it towards the end of high school, but it wasn't a difficult addition to put on French because the Latin root is there. So I could kind of go from one to the other. And same with my best friend from high school. He did something similar. His Spanish was slightly better than mine, whether or not it is to this day now. It probably still is. But I think it's a lost art. And I think us coming back to obviously refining ourselves, we can test those boundaries. It's like, obviously some people won't, but because they'll be, well, coming back to my point that I said, the week 1, they'd be happy. Week 2, don't like this situation. Week 3, really don't like this situation. And I think maybe week 4, they might be all right. And some obviously won't be, and they'll be still climbing the walls. This gives them an opportunity to kind of, well, reassess, reevaluate the priorities in life. I had the willingness, well, okay, let me reacquaint myself with a skill set that I would say I have. I wouldn't say I perfected the language, but let's try and reestablish this notion. Obviously, from a hearing perspective, I can understand it. I never lost that, but let's see if I can remember how to communicate in another language. And that was very frustrating with French because I'd gone from and probably Spanish to some degree with being in school, speaking it on a daily basis to then to go into it's non-existent and your only form of communication is English. So for me, it has been frustrating to kind of speak to people, and they kind of say they're very accommodating of that, to kind of say, well, people you grew up with, their English is good. So it's like, well, James, I get the point that you're trying to make, and then you could fill in a word with English and that they would make sense of it. But I think to be able to go that step further to re-immerse yourself with something that's challenging, I think this is probably going to be, you talked about growth in terms of it's your way of probably attaining something that you wanted to try, be it, I don't know, learning German, learning something that's where, I don't know, be, for example, I don't know, Chinese, to make something really challenging, or I don't know, picking up a hobby you haven't done for years, and actually challenging yourself to kind of, well, I want to really test myself in these times. Obviously for an athlete, that's not very difficult. It's seen as an uncontrollable, or should I say control, it should be the other way around. It's seen as a controller because it's a choice that you've made to go down that road. But in terms of, well, being selected on a team and vice versa, making up you're not in control. Be it you've got other players that are obviously not going to give you a free pass. Coaches are not going to give you a free pass. And your opponent is never going to. So you're never really totally into control. And if you reflect on that, I think you're coming back to what Fergus said. You're in a better position as an athlete to be able to contemplate this position. I would disagree to some extent, because he did say there are outliers, and I think I'm an outlier, because yes, I was in control of, to a certain extent, my destiny in sport. But then with this, I struggle. And I think I'm not alone in that sentiment of we are kind of a community in that sense of dealing this. We're all in the same boat as, well, you can dwell on it, you can grow with it, but it's still an uncertainty as how long is it going to last. Ultimately, there probably will be a cure, but it's how long that's going to take. And ultimately, obviously, there's going to be a sacrifice that people are going to lose their life. So it's like, well, it's trying to challenge this misinformation that's out there and kind of say, well, is that genuine? I've kind of gone complete other way completely. It's like, well, I don't want to hear too much about it anyway. It's out of my control because it's outside. Right. It can stay outside, and I'll control what I can control inside the house. Not necessarily stay in the house, but follow the government guidelines and all that, and then I'm in control, even though we never really are. So I think that one is obviously coming to my point, and obviously not waffling on too much. I think people need to put things in perspective. It's like, with a lot of things, we're not in control. My own coach said to me, he put the figurative statistics into perspective. It's like, it's not I don't want to use this word lightly. It's not a big deal versus other illnesses, being knocked down in the street and things like that. But obviously, I'm not saying for somebody that's either dealing with it, family member that's dealt with it, or you've had a bereavement, I'm not saying your sacrifice is not warranted. Obviously, if you're having to deal with that situation, it's an unfortunate situation, but we're not immortal. Or should I say not yet? Obviously, for people that maybe got lots and lots of money, that's a possibility. But for the majority of people, we're not robots. We're not going to be on the earth for hundreds, thousands of years. And I think if you put it from that basis of, fiction of, like vampires, things like that.
Right.
That's obviously a detriment, because they see their family members come and go. It's like, well, that's, you see that would probably, as a human being, that would probably eat away at you as a human being. You kind of seeing your loved ones perish, and next generation up come and go. It's like, well, that would probably destroy the majority. And I'll end with that in terms of the morbidity of that. But I think we do need to put things in perspective of, we can play the victim, or we can play, as my coach said, be a hero within our story. And I think most people would rather, if you want to be the positive, you'd rather be, I don't know, Hercules, Achilles. You want to be the hero within that story that people talk about. You don't want to be the one that's dies in the beginning of a movie. Obviously, that person's remembered, but it's for that reason. And look at it from the positives.
Yeah, absolutely. You started that conversation, and you brought up education, and you brought up seniors, and immediately I think my nephew's a senior, so he'll be graduating this year in May with whether it's a diploma in hand or it's something that certificate they send him on the computer. I'm not sure how that's going to look, but blessed and fortunate that he's already been accepted into university. So we know his path, right? But for those that don't, and I think about those kids, like Jason is a kid who, no matter what is going to happen, he's a kid that rises to the top. There's just some kids who are like that, like, sure, and he really does have it. Like, my sister hasn't helped him with any homework probably since he was 4. He's one of those kids. His brain works in a different way, but he's also musically gifted and talented. The things that he's, not upset, but just kind of disappointed in not being able to do is he loves to perform for people like he does. He's a drama, theater, musically gifted individual, and he was supposed to be the lead in this play in the spring. It's not happening, right? It's not happening. He and another senior, they had 2 seniors, they're leading parts, and he had never had a leading part with this particular girl, and they're just good friends. They're like been good friends from, I think preschool. They went to the same preschool and the same elementary. Then, there's just like, she's a good girl, not girlfriend, but girlfriend to him. Like they're good people. And he's like, that's what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss performing with Catherine. He wasn't talking about prom. He wasn't talking about all these rites of passage things. He wasn't even talking about graduation and walking across the stage. Like he was going to miss that experience. And I thought, what a solid young man, number one. That understands the power that he has been able to create and build as someone who can emote some really cool stuff on a stage, right? So that's what he misses, and he misses doing it with her specifically in that crew that had spent so much time preparing for it and all that kind of stuff. On the back end of that, he has 4 what we call AP classes here. They're like the highest level AP classes. And he said, whoa, man, my days are different. He says, when you have 4 AP classes, you're in school and you're in class and the teacher's kind of walking you through it so that you get it. Like they're high level conversations, high level calculus and AP literature. And he says, now I'm getting 2 and 3 assignments on a computer and I got to figure out which one is more important. Like what he's learning outside of this experience of being in a classroom where it's very structured, he's having to learn structure in kind of like a rip the Band-Aid off kind of time. Like he wasn't expecting that, he had structure in his day. He knew he went, at 8 o'clock, this 9 o'clock to that class, and he knew those were his pockets of time to focus in and dial in whatever was being taught. Right. And to keep your brain focused in that space. Where now, like for 2 weeks, he was kind of like, I feel overwhelmed. I'm not sure what to start first. What do I do first? He has an online Spanish class. You mentioned Spanish. That's his language that he's taking in. And he actually received a Hispanic scholarship to the college he's going to because he's done so great in just, the conversational spaces. And he doesn't speak Spanish. Like it wasn't, even though we're Spanish, it was not a second language in his home. Right. But he's really embraced the language. And he and my mom have really, because my mom speaks Spanish fluently. So the 2 of them, grandmother and grandson, have been able to connect on a school level. How cool is that? He calls her and asks her for help with Spanish homework. And now this intergenerational because he would normally ask his teacher, but now he calls my mom. And so now, like, what a cool thing to think of an 18-year-old kid reconnecting with an 83-year-old grandmother simply because of what's happening on that level, right? That's a beautiful thing that's coming out of this, that I could sit here and go, well, it's, it's this, or it's forcing this, or he can't have graduation, or he's just like all the other seniors across the world, right? That are having to learn different. But in the same breath, I talked to him and I said, Jason, how do you feel about this? Like, tell me how you feel. And he said, to be honest, I was going to have to learn some of these skills anyway when I went off to college. Like, I feel like I'm kind of getting a head start. Like, when he took 2 weeks to kind of just let it process and kind of go like everybody else in the world was trying to do, like, what does this even mean? I don't understand what's happening at 18 years old. Okay. Just like 50-year-olds are doing the same thing. 40-year-olds are doing the same thing. He was like, so he went out, he ordered on Amazon, he ordered himself a cool planner that's helping him get on task. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to block out my day. So I gave him some strategies. I said, listen, Jason, normally you go to school and they have your day planned. Guess what? You got to plan your day. I don't care how you do it. If you want to do days like, you know what, Monday's going to be my calculus and literature day. And just spend it on two, because I got to be honest, he was so far ahead in the classes that really what he needs to do is practice for the practicum, if you will, the tests. He'll be okay. It's the kids that you were talking about that aren't at that space, that I'm hoping that there's still strategies out there and people are still connecting to those kids that are I don't want to say just the average kid, but the kid who struggles and needs the more one-on-one in order to be able to finish and complete assignments, that people are paying attention to that too. Not only was I a coach, but I also was a teacher, and I worked in a school for learning challenges for special needs kids, right? I did that for 5 years. And I think about what happens when they went online. Like, I haven't been there and I don't know how long, but I think about that school and how are they managing those expectations with children who learn different, who, yeah, they love technology. I can tell you a lot of kids love technology, but are they getting the resources that they really need to be successful? To complete, like you said, what's out there and what they need for their graduation, or what they need for the next grade, or what they need for, you know what I mean? And I think that's where, for a kid like Jason, he's going to be successful. And I think the kids like him, that have a pretty good home life, that have a laptop that they can actually hop on and do work. What about the kids that don't even have the technology to do it? What about those kids? And the school systems in the States are trying. They're driving around and dropping off laptops to people. They're trying to get iPads in people's hands. They're trying to get them the resources. But I also know that I've got a teacher friend in San Antonio, and we were just talking about this via Zoom the other day when I connected with him. He said, I'm an educator, so is my wife. They're working on their doctorates. Because we have 100,000 students in San Antonio, Texas. And of those, only 25,000 had appropriate devices to run the systems that they wanted to run. Using Zoom or whatever their platform. I don't think they're using Zoom. They're using a different educational platform because there's several out there. But regardless, only 25,000 of those 100. He goes, and Jessica, we've been out since whatever he told me, March 15th, or I think it was the 15th or 16th, whatever that date was. He says, and I've only been able to reach 50% of my students by phone. He goes, I work in a challenging district, meaning kids that may only have one parent at home, kids that maybe live with their grandparents, kids that maybe are living on their own. We're not really sure, He said, so for me to say that I've only reached 50%, we have some challenges to work out. We've never even thought about this. Who has? Who thought the educational system would be shut down? Like, that was never a planned thought. I thought about that just last night. I said, I haven't driven my car since March 14th. And I kind of got to make sure it starts and the battery's not dead. Never thought about it. So I'm like, I'm just going to take a drive around the block. So I just hopped in the car. I headed out one way just to drive around the block to just make sure the engine light. When I turned my AC on, honestly, it took about 3 minutes for it to cool down. It ran hot air for a bit because it hasn't been run. Like little things like that. I thought about that. My dad would always tell me, hey, can't leave the car sitting too much. You got to make sure you run it. And all of a sudden it hit me last night. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go around the block. No big deal. So as I went down one block to turn, all this new construction on the roads had happened. I've been in my house for, 4 weeks almost. I didn't even know, like, there is activity happening, right? And I thought, well, that's interesting. It just kind of makes you take a step back and go, I've been so focused on being as positive I can be within my little home that I control. You talked about controllables. Here's what I control: my attitude. When I wake up, when I go to sleep, what I put in my brain. I can choose to scroll on social media and just get inundated with junk. Or if I'm going to go to social media, I go with a purpose and an intention. I go to social media to connect with people that I want to connect with. You being one, Chip being another, Will that I just mentioned that I just talked to, Jenny that I just started that thing. I go to my social media outlets to either put out a positive message, right? Or put out something to provoke a conversation, just a healthy, robust, vulnerable conversation. I don't go to social media to get a rise out of folks or to create this dramatic conversation. That's not what, to me, that's just my version of what I choose to use it for. And I educate the nieces and the nephews, the ones that I think I have a little more, I don't want to say pressure, but a little more connection to, for them to go, I respect where you're coming from. They call me Ja. I respect where you're coming from, Ja. I get that. So if you're going to post, guys, I just want you to be cognizant of what that can mean to folks who are viewing it, right? It's like your brand. It's your person. It's who you are. And when you go to my feed, you're going to find that I'm pretty much what you see is what you get. I love sports. I love kids. I love being in an area and having a true mission about biohacking. I love biohacking. We haven't even talked about that. Nutrigenomics. I love to educate people on a natural way of health, especially today, and how that natural thought process can carry over in anything that you do, So I look at the opportunities we have, and I look at it more as an opportunity versus an adversity. Going back to what we talked about earlier. Where we sit today could be viewed as an adverse space, or can be used as a positive platform to say, okay, let me look in the mirror and how can I come out of this adversity in a real positively growthful experience to say, I did, like you said, learn a skill. Or I hadn't dusted off my mic until you asked me. I haven't used my my mic that I plugged into my computer in probably, 10 months. Why is that? Why is that, right? So when you said you have a mic, I was like, yes, I have a mic. It's in my drawer that's been tucked away. Why? I don't know. Things like that. Like, we have so many things and experiences that they may have been great, but it happens once and then we just throw it away. And I'm like, why don't we just continue to nurture it and pour a little more water to it so it can flourish and flower and bloom? And we're in spring right now, so I'm all about blooming. What better time for this to occur where I can now feel we're in some new spaces, right? There will be a new norm. We don't know what it looks like, but the controlling of the controllables are things that I know I can control. My attitude, how I respond and react to social media, how I respond and react to, my mom and my sister in the other room. That's what I control. My being, my thoughts, and if I can impart those and share those with others that maybe can unlock what's been kind of dormant for someone else. You know what? You're right. I haven't done a skill yet. My mom just said that the other day. She says, you know what? I really want to start painting again. I never knew that my mom used to paint. I was a kid. Do you think I knew what her hobby was? I was doing me. And I said, that's awesome, Mom. So she went back in, and I guess in the shed we have an outdoor shed. She had some painting supplies and she pulled them out. I was like, that's awesome. Where you can tap into something that sparks joy in your life, whatever that may be. Adult coloring books. I don't care. Something simple, a crossword puzzle. Things that you go, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. I love the fact that you said you're diving into Spanish, and, that's a skill that why not? My sister has been cooking gourmet like every time I'm like, what are we cooking today? Like I come out of my room and she's got, so she's exploring her cooking. Great. We have all kinds of supplies in the kitchen cabinet that we've never used. I don't know why. It's just sitting there. I said, so why not? She's like, I think I'm going to try to make cauliflower pizza with blah, 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 blah. I was like, great. Because my mom, gluten doesn't always sit well with her. So she's trying to make cauliflower crust and we're going to practice. And that's what she wants to do today. I was like, great. So that's the afternoon thing we're going to do together as a family. Like, I think it can drive people together in a positive way if we're open to that versus just come in your room, shut the door, and I'm just going to be in my space, So I love where you're going with that. And I look at my nephew as he's my little, my little example, I've got a 21-year-old niece who college now is just like you said, online. And that's a struggle for her because she's an in the person kind of kid. And so, Jason, the 18-year-old, is helping the 21-year-old along that journey, which up until that point, it's like, oh yeah, you're my brother, you're my sister, and they go off and they do their own things. Well, now they're forced, in a sense, to be in this space, and they can perhaps come out of this with a better relationship than they had before, because they're relying on each other for different things. She's like a YouTuber. She could YouTube, and she's told me all about ring lighting and how you do this and how you do that. And I'm like, I don't even know half of what she talks about from a techie standpoint. And he adds value to her from the musical spaces that he's like, hey, how about I create a new arrangement for you and I give you some music so that you can add to your YouTubes? And she's like, oh, cool, thanks. So he goes and arranges music and so now they're like collaborating when before they were just in their rooms doing their own thing. My sister's like, it's been kind of a musically interesting space that we're in right now. You know what I'm saying? That they're collaborating on different efforts. And I thought, that's awesome. What a beautiful thing to come out of craziness. Is a brother and sister actually finding each other and thinking, we can be friends. We were friends when we were little. Then they grow up and they go, middle school and high school happens. And, you're my baby brother. And now he's teaching her some things as the baby brother, and the big sister's teaching him some things too. So it's been kind of cool listening to my sister share some of their experiences, which is awesome.
So for my final question to you, Jessica, before we wrap up the episode, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
It's loaded. Okay. It is loaded. Here's what the one sentence is to take away. Today was all about just having a supersizing conversation that has been my thing forever, but it can be yours too. If you are open to the opportunity of turning adversity into a growthful experience that can help you unlock everything that's deep inside of yourself in a supersizing space. That's it. It's about opening up. It's about looking in the mirror. It really is. And taking the opportunities to do that. Supersizing just means exactly what it sounds like. Supersizing your inside, the depths of your soul, and how I can take each individual little piece of that and just blow it up in different aspects. I'm excited to explore more of me in this journey. You know what I mean? and help others explore more themselves. So connecting with you is really kind of opened up some things. I've got my notebook here because when we finish, I'm downloading some of the things that you shared with me. This is not your one sentence. This is just so you know what I'm taking away from our conversation. Mm-hmm. I feel like every meetup, every conversation, every opportunity that you have to be in front of someone to share experiences should be a growthful learning experience for me, and for you. So yeah, my notebook's going to get filled with some notes that I'm going to take from what you shared today, because you've really enlightened me, and I really appreciate that. For sure.
It's my pleasure. And thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
You're welcome.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let Jessica and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging me over on Instagram at JamesORoberts11. And again, you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And in addition, if you had any further questions for Jessica or myself, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab Resources. But not forgetting, I've also started this Facebook group, especially for this podcast, which you can find by typing The Mindset Athlete. And last but not least, one for the amputees listening to this podcast, I've recently created a Facebook group called The Amputee Coach, Fitness and Nutrition for Amputees to help you lose 10 to 30 pounds. So make sure to check those links out. They will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.libsyn.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.